Okay, we got the fret bender set up to bend the radius slightly more than what we need. The sharper radius is so that when we go to put the fret wire in, when we first go to put it in, it'll be tighter on the ends, and we'll press it in first, and then you press the middle in to get a good tight press. One more simple step we're going to do just to make the frets go in easier is to take a little small triangle file and put the corner of it into the slot and file it slightly, which will give just a slight bevel on the edge, which will help the tying of the fret wire go in easier. You can see that little bit of black on the rag there that came from the frets. Okay, we got all the frets cut. We'll get set up now to start pressing them in with a little bit of CA glue. Go take a little bit of wax, paste wax, on a Q-tip and rub a little bit of wax right along the edge of the groove. On each side, so that if we get any, we get a little sloppy with the super glue, we can wipe it off and it won't sink down into the wood. And then we just wipe everything off. Got the first fret ready. Need a little bit more pressure. Alright, there's the ends pressed down. Now we'll change the little brass caul and put in the 9.5 inch radius. Kind of hard to tell. Looks pretty seated. Wipe off that wax now. I'm using 3 different radius brass cauls to press the frets in, starting out with a 6-inch radius and then going to a 9.5 inch radius and then a 12 inch to make sure it's pressed in the center down good. we've got all the fret ends trimmed off, we're going to have to level the frets, because when pressing them in, you never get them all perfect, and so there's some variations. And you check it with what's called a fret rocker. Like right there, it's a little bit high right there, higher than these two. So if you go down through here and check them all, you'll see that some are higher than others. So what we need to do is take this leveling beam with a strip of sandpaper on it, and we'll take a marker and mark the top of all the frets, and then take this leveling beam and go across it until we remove all the markings, and then we know we're all level. Then we'll come back and radius the top of the frets, which is called crowning, and then of course polish them. So that's what we're getting ready to do. I've got some sandpaper already on here, some 320. Feels a little bit worn, but we'll check it out and see if we need to change sandpaper. I think we might be right. We can see it removing some material a couple places. So I did check the neck right before we started. The deck is still pretty darn straight. And we're letting the weight of the sanding beam do the sanding. I'm not putting any down pressure. By going back and forth, we're following the radius of the neck. Okay, we've got all the frets pretty much leveled now. I don't know if you can see that. Most of them look kind of flat on the top. Some places flatter than others. That's just where we leveled it. And so we'll get ready to put the crown back on, the radius back on top of the frets. But before we do that, we're going to bevel these edges here so they're not real sharp. And we have a special file jig made up for that. This is the file mounted in on an angle in this block here to put an angle bevel on the ends of the frets. I may need to turn this file over to the coarse side to get it worked down, then change to the finer side. Let me do that. Now before we radius the top of the frets, which is called crowning, we're going to have to tape off the fretboard. so that the files we use doesn't damage the wood on the fretboard. We're using a radiused diamond file. It's concave down in there to put the radius back onto the fret. I don't know if it shows up in the camera here. We've radiused these first two frets and left just a tiny bit of flat on the very top, which will be taken away once we do the sanding, go through our sandpapers once we finish filing. So you have to kind of watch what you're doing, that you don't file too much. You want to leave that little tiny bit of flat on the top, right in the center. Now that we've got the tops crowned, we take this little fret end beveling file and just ease the sharp corner on the ends of the frets. Now we're going to use what's called fret erasers to do some rough sanding on the top of the frets and sides of the frets, just to give a little more shape to them. This, I believe, is like a 300 grit, 320, something like that. And then they have a 400 grit. Now we're getting ready to start on 600 grit. Okay, we've finished with the fret erasers up through the 1000 grit. I went ahead and pulled all the old tape off and retaped it because it was getting kind of frayed and wasn't sticking down very good, so still wanted to protect the fingerboard till we finished. What I'm going to do now is finish up the polishing with these polishing pads, which start at 1500 grit and go up through 12,000. So it won't take too long just to brush over with each one of these. Just kind of get each side, then come back to the top and the ends. I like these pads because they kind of conform to the shape of the fret. This is the last polishing pad, the 12,000 grit. Alright, that should take care of the polishing. Nice and shiny. Now we'll get the tape off and see about getting ready to make the a new nut.